These Democratic socialists at another of their conventions, they were told to make jazz hands instead of clapping, lest some delegates suffer sensory overload. And also, and I'm not joking, they were told not to be wearing, any aggressive scents.
Please don't go into that space with anything that's like an aggressive scent, for instance, right? Because that's going to be difficult for people.
Oh, for sake. This is who the Democrats are thinking of following, city-run grocery stores? No, I don't want that. I want a Democrat who reassures me if you like your Whole Foods, you can keep your Whole Foods.
Bill Maher has never been shy about roasting his own side, but this moment feels different. The sharp-tongued comic took aim at Democrats over moves he thinks could seriously backfire. It was classic Maher, merciless, funny, and brutally honest. If you like unfiltered political takes, hit subscribe because this breakdown is about to get wild.
That if you don't see it right away and go along, you're bad, stupid, and deplorable. As if you were saying, duh, 2 + 2 = 5, isn't that obvious? Yeah, it's obvious you can't add. You can't just say math is racist. Healthy at any weight? If the men's football team played the women's team, it would be a tie. You can't just say.
Bill Maher didn't hold back when he went after what he calls the growing woke mindset inside his own party. His argument was simple but blunt. Democrats can't just say whatever sounds trendy and expect automatic applause anymore. Those days are gone. In today's political climate, every statement is instantly analyzed, fact-checked, clipped, and spread across the internet within minutes. Maher says voters aren't passive spectators anymore. They're paying attention, comparing claims, and quickly spotting contradictions. His warning was straightforward: you can't stretch reality and expect people to go along with it. When messaging starts sounding disconnected from everyday experience, trust erodes fast. According to Maher, pretending something is true doesn't make it convincing, it makes leaders look out of touch. And once voters start feeling that gap between rhetoric and reality, the consequences go beyond criticism. Parties don't just lose arguments, eventually they risk losing elections.
Democratic socialism is like a dating profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor in the Oval Office last week. Bernie, AOC, Mandani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're democratic socialists, and that's a very different thing, and I don't think people know that yet.
Maher didn't stop there. He also raised concerns about what he sees as the Democratic Party's growing comfort with socialist rhetoric and candidates. To him, that trend is a risky political gamble. He pointed to polling suggesting a large share of Democrats view socialism positively, while fewer express strong support for capitalism. In Maher's view, that shift isn't just symbolic, it signals a party moving into politically dangerous territory. His message was blunt: embracing ideas many Americans still distrust could push away moderate voters and hand opponents an easy campaign weapon. People, he argues, tend to resist systems they associate with excessive government control or economic instability. Maher's core point was simple but sharp: if Democrats lean too heavily into labels and policies that unsettle mainstream voters, they're not just inviting criticism. They're risking credibility, trust, and potentially the outcome of future elections.
The most.
I don't think people realize we already have a lot of socialism. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, food stamps, veterans benefits, Pell Grants, COVID-era payments, farm subsidies, disability payments, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, corporate bailouts, and the jobs program that is building weapons the Pentagon doesn't even want. All that is socialism, much of it appropriate to soften the edges of capitalism. But the DSA are radicals about this concept, and radical economic policy is always ineluctably married to radical social policy. Their platform, for example, calls for completely open borders. They're for what Biden was doing, but more. You think you're going to win an election on that?
Bill Maher also made a point many people overlook. The United States already has programs that function a bit like collective systems, things like Social Security, Medicare, public schools, and emergency services. Maher acknowledged those programs play an important role in everyday life. His concern, though, is about balance. In his view, there's a difference between practical social programs and turning socialism into a central political brand. He warned that pushing the label too aggressively could scare off moderate voters and hand critics the perfect talking point. Maher reminded viewers he's warned Democrats before about strategic mistakes that were later blamed for election losses. From his perspective, the current moment feels similar. His argument wasn't about abandoning compassion or reform. It was about political survival. Move too far too fast, he says, and voters may push back. For Maher, the lesson is simple: learn from history or risk repeating it.
It's either defund the police or military in the streets. Either MAGA's crypto crony capitalism or city-run grocery stores. No, I don't want that. I want a Democrat who reassures me if you like your Whole Foods, you can keep your Whole Foods. Governor-elect Spanberger once said about Biden's presidency that, quote, nobody elected him to be FDR. They elected him to be normal. Normal. You know, at this year's DSA convention, or as it's commonly known, Comic-Con, get this, you had to submit a photo of a negative COVID test to get in.
What really fires up Bill Maher is what he sees as the growing mix of woke activism and socialist rhetoric inside his own party. In his view, ideological purity tests and activist messaging are slowly pulling Democrats away from the political center, the place where most elections are actually won or lost. When political messaging focuses more on signaling virtue than solving real problems, he says voters tend to tune out. And sometimes they don't just tune out, they walk away completely. Maher's broader point is simple. Political parties win by persuading the middle, not by preaching only to their most loyal supporters. Leaning heavily on polarizing language and economic labels can make a party appear disconnected from everyday concerns. Instead of strengthening their position, he argues it could create new political weaknesses. Much of his frustration comes from watching what he believes are avoidable strategic mistakes happening in real time. For Maher, regaining political strength starts with rebuilding trust among the voters who ultimately decide elections.
Seems to me that there are two pillars that this country is founded on. One is democracy, and one is capitalism, free markets. And it seems like one party wants to get rid of one, and the other party wants to get rid of the other, right? The Republicans are not that, democracy is just not number one on their list. It just isn't. It isn't. It's behind Christianity and a few other things. And the Democrats, I mean, I read these 74% are for democratic socialism. Only 16% favor capitalism. Is this going to be a country that I don't recognize in 5 to 10 years if we don't have these two pillars?
Bill Maher also pushed back on the constant warnings that democracy itself is on the brink. In his view, the bigger political risk isn't an immediate authoritarian threat. It's a party drifting too far away from the voters it needs to win. He argues the real challenge could come from ideological changes happening within the Democratic base. Maher pointed to polling suggesting rising support for socialist ideas among some Democratic voters. To him, that trend could reshape the party's direction in ways leaders may not fully anticipate. If it continues, he says, openly socialist candidates might gain stronger traction in primaries and potentially climb into major national races. His concern isn't only about labels, it's about the political consequences that follow them. Positions widely viewed as extreme can push away moderates and independents, the voters who often decide tight elections. Maher's warning is blunt: when a party moves faster than the country eventually pushes back.
I mean, where are the Democrats going with this? If Mondami is the face of the Democrats on the East Coast and Katie Porter is the face on the West Coast, I don't know if that's great politically for that party.
Maher made his concern pretty clear. If Democrats keep drifting further in this direction, he believes the political consequences could be serious. His argument comes down to political reality. Outside strongly liberal cities and activist circles, many Americans still view socialism with deep skepticism. For millions of voters, capitalism, despite its flaws, still represents opportunity, upward mobility, and the belief that hard work can lead to success. Maher worries that leaning too heavily into anti-capitalist rhetoric could push away the very voters Democrats need to win national elections. Most Americans, he argues, aren't looking to tear the system down entirely. They want reforms that make it fairer and more functional. In his view, there's a major difference between improving a system and replacing it altogether. When that line gets blurred, he warns political backlash can follow, and in elections, that backlash can cost real power.
These democratic socialists at another of their conventions, they were told to make jazz hands instead of clapping, lest some delegates suffer sensory overload. And also, and I'm not joking, they were told not to be wearing, any aggressive scents.
Please don't go into that space with anything that's like an aggressive scent, for instance, right? Because that's going to be difficult for people.
Bill Maher says he's reached his limit with what he sees as the Democratic Party's growing obsession with woke logic and performative politics. In his view, too much energy goes into symbolic gestures, viral talking points, and impressing insiders, while everyday voter concerns get pushed to the background. Maher isn't staying quiet anymore because he believes these patterns are repeating mistakes that could cost the party politically. His frustration comes from a deeper concern that Democrats may be unintentionally sabotaging themselves. By catering too heavily to smaller but very vocal factions, he argues the party risks overlooking the broader electorate that actually decides national elections. Most voters, he says, care about practical issues: jobs, affordability, safety, and stability. When those priorities feel ignored, people notice quickly. Maher believes that gap creates a major opportunity for opponents. His warning is blunt: chase internal applause instead of public trust, and the political consequences could be serious.
Democrats today have gone out of their way to post messages on social media about the current Trump administration and what's happening to American lives. The problem is they're all literally saying the same damn thing. Don't believe me? Check it out.
When I win, I will immediately bring prices down starting on day one.
Shh, that ain't true. That's what you just heard. Since day one of Donald Trump's presidency, prices are not down, they're up. Inflation is getting worse, not better. The prices of grocery, gas, household essentials.
Now you see why Stephen A. Smith was in the polls as a presidential candidate? See what I'm talking about? You see that idiocy right there?
Maher isn't the only public figure voicing concern about the direction of the Democratic Party. Others, including outspoken media personality Stephen A. Smith, have raised similar questions. Smith's criticism focuses less on ideology and more on communication and results. In his view, flashy statements and headline-grabbing gestures don't always translate into real connection with voters. Smith argues that many people are looking for authenticity, clarity, and strong leadership rather than symbolic political moments that feel disconnected from everyday life. When messaging sounds polished but lacks substance, voters can sense it. His comments reflect a broader concern about whether political strategy is actually resonating with the public. When voices from different backgrounds start raising similar doubts, it suggests deeper anxiety about priorities, credibility, and whether the party can rebuild trust with voters moving forward.
22 Democratic senators be literally echoing the same thing and think that would resonate with the American people. All it shows is that the same fabric of our democracy is unchanging in the eyes of some of these officials, and as a result, the constituency they represent, which is why Donald Trump is in office. What, do I have to come up to Capitol Hill and give you lessons? Seriously, you don't get it? All you did, Elizabeth Warren, Cory Booker, Chuck Schumer, let's all get together. Let's put this in a prompter, and all together, albeit in separate rooms, we'll grab a microphone and say the same damn thing. And that's what's going to resonate with the American people. And then you wonder why you're no longer in power.
In the end, Bill Maher says his criticism doesn't come from hatred toward his party. It comes from frustration and concern that Democrats could be steering themselves toward political trouble. In his view, the party risks getting swallowed by ideological trends, performative gestures, and messaging that pushes away the very voters it needs to win. Maher's argument is simple but pointed. National elections aren't won by speaking only to activists. They're won by connecting with everyday Americans. Voices like Stephen A. Smith raising similar concerns suggest this isn't just one comedian venting, it's part of a wider conversation about political strategy and credibility. Maher's challenge to Democrats is direct: reconnect with reality, focus on practical issues, and rebuild trust with voters. Ignore those warnings, he suggests, and the consequences won't just be criticism. They could include electoral defeat and a longer struggle to stay politically relevant.